Let's talk about the Gemara. One of the terms you need to know to understand the Gemara, we mentioned it in the previous weeks, is Amora. And you can look on page 77, key term 3.1. An Amora is a rabbi, a sage who lived during the time of the Gemara. Does anyone remember what the name of the sage is called from a rabbi who lived in the times of the Mishnah? Does anyone remember? Tana. Very good. It's called a Tana. And if you lived, and that was around 200. But if you lived in the times of the Gemara, which is around 300 CE, all the way, it went for about 300 years. It went all the way to the time about 500, the end of 500 CE. If you lived during that time and you were a rabbi and you were one of the 800 rabbis that were debating the Mishnah or analyzing the Mishnah, you were called an Amora. So remember the word Amora. Again, it's over 3 centuries. And then what is the Gemara? The Gemara is the interpretation of the Mishnah, the discussion of what the Mishnah means. And how do they interpret the Mishnah? With a good old-fashioned question, answer, question, answer, back and forth. And that's how they analyze it. Okay, so instead of keeping things theoretical, let us actually read the Mishnah we read last week, and we're going to play a little game, and we're going to say, let's say you are rabbis of the Gemara, the Amoraim. What kind of questions would you ask on this Mishnah? So I'll read the Mishnah. Page 78, text 1. One must refrain from eating on the eve of Passover for close to the time for the reciting of the Mincha prayers until after darkness has fallen. All right? So it's the eve, it's the afternoon of Passover. Everyone hears me? Does everyone hear me? Is there an echo? Hello? Ooh, maybe it's me though. I feel like I'm echoing. It says when God gave the Torah, there was no echo. True story. God gave the Torah, there was only God. An echo is supposed to bounce off something. But if God is everything, there could be no echo when God talks. Anyway, but I apparently am not God because there's an echo. Okay. Back to the class. All right. So if it's before Passover and you're a little hungry and you want a snack, maybe a coffee with one of those, what are those things people eat on Passover? Those little pastries called macaroons. Oh, those are horrible. Anyway, I guess it depends which macaroons, but I never like them. Anyway, so you say, you know what? I want a coffee and a macaroon so I could like fill my stomach. This Mishnah says no. From Mincha, don't eat. Okay, we'll talk about why soon. Then next, even the most destitute person in the Jewish nation should not eat unless he's reclining. So if you have the Seder, you have to recline. All right, rule number 2. Rule number 3, he should not be provided with less than 4 cups of wine, even if he is being supplied by the public food bank. All right, everyone needs to drink 4 cups of wine. Number 4, when they pour him the first cup of wine, according to Beis Shammai, he should first recite the blessing over the festival, and then the blessing over the wine. According to Beis Hillel, first he should recite the blessing over the wine, and then the blessing over the festival. Okay, we love to argue about everything. Now, I now dub thee all Tanaim. You're reading the Mishnah. What questions could you ask? So let's look at this little chart, 3.1 on page 79. I'll read the law, and let's see what kind of question we could ask. And these are questions that Talmud asks. So on Passover Eve, we should avoid eating from mincha until nightfall. Any questions on that? It's a little broad range. Define it, right? That's going to be done today. We're going to be defining what that means. Okay. What's that? Oh, can you drink? That's a good question. Very good question. All right. Can you drink? And I'll give you one of the questions that the Gemara actually does ask. And this is going to be one of the big topics we're going to talk about. Why does it specify Passover? What about other holidays? What about before Sukkot? What about before Shavuot? You know, you want to taste some of the cheesecake. Make sure it tastes kosher. Why mincha? Very good question. Why mincha? Okay. Question. Law number 2. At the Seder, we should recline. Any questions you could ask on this? Which direction? Very good. How far? Should you do a little bit or should you be laying down flat? Very good. And also here, very good. And here's another question. Which part of the meal do we recline? Is it for the maror? Is it for the chicken soup? Is it for the brisket? It says you should recline, but the Mishnah doesn't give us details. Recline when? All right, let's keep going. Public food banks must provide poor people with 4 cups of wine. One of the questions the Talmud asks on this is something I do not expect you to know about. And that is, don't we know that you're not supposed to do anything in doubles? Anything in doubles is a bad omen. Now, you don't know that. And I didn't know that until I studied the Talmud. But it's actually true. The Talmud had this belief at a certain time, it was superstitious to do things in doubles. So why are we commanded to do 4 cups of wine? Now, the Talmud actually, now we don't worry about this superstition right now. Why not? Not for today's class, but that could be another class. But I will tell you the answer of the Talmud. And the answer is Passover is known as Leil Shimurim, the night of being guarded by God, right? That's when we got out of Egypt. In fact, there are many people that do not lock their doors on Passover night to demonstrate that Passover is the night of protection. God protects the Jewish people. He skipped over the angel of death skipped over the houses, right? Anyway, so that's why the answer, don't worry, you could do things in doubles. All right, anyway, let's go on. Here's another question. Public food banks must provide poor people with 4 cups of wine. Isn't it obvious? Doesn't a poor person need to have a Seder? Why does the Mishnah have to say it? Remember we established last week that the Mishnah does not say things that are obvious? So why is it saying it? The Gemara actually answers, you don't have this in your text, I'll just share with you. The Gemara answers that there was a famous teaching of Rabbi Akiva, advised people to never accept charity from public food banks for festive meals. For lunch on Tuesday, if you're hungry, go to a public food bank. But for a holiday meal, scrape your pennies together and buy it and own it, and that'll bring blessing to your life. That was the teaching of Rabbi Akiva. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you could take things from the food bank. But any money you can, try not to take food bank for Shabbat or for Yom Tov, because that will bless you and make you not poor anymore. Now you know why. But Passover, Rabbi Akiva didn't hold this. Passover, the Mishnah says, even if you follow the teaching of Rabbi Akiva, to earn your holy Shabbat dinner. Passover, this doesn't count. Don't play games. Take from the food bank. It's okay. All right. What we're doing here is what? We're having a little exercise of what Talmud does, like how we analyze things. All right. Explore reasons. All right. Hold on. What's the last one? We said when you make the Kiddush, what do you make the blessing on first? Do you make the blessing on the holiday? Or do you make the blessing on the wine? Reb Hillel, Beis Hillel says the blessing on the wine comes first. Beis Shammai says the blessing on the holiday comes first. What's the reasoning of these two rabbis? Why do they have these debates? What are they basing their theories on? Very good. And that's what they're going to weigh to give their reasoning, Mike. So hang in there because we're actually going to read that in a moment. Oh, I was talking about how, I mentioned it. There was a time that they were superstitious about doing things in doubles. In twos and fours and eights and 16s or whatever. Yeah. No problem. All right. My friends, I present to you a new concept that you need to put in your tool bag. And you can look on page 82 for this word, Braita. Or if you're an Ashkenazic, Brisa. What is a Brisa? Remember that the oral tradition was written down by Rabbi Yehuda. That was called the Mishnah. But there were lots of scraps of paper that were floating around that didn't quite make it into the Mishnah. They were personal notes at that time which students were writing. So if you find a scrap of ancient paper from the time of the Mishnah that has a teaching that's not in the Mishnah, what do? Do you just throw it out? It was written by a scholar at that time, which was closer to the source. Those papers were saved and collected, and they were called, each one was called a brisa, or a braita, or braitot, or brisais. And the sages want those brisas. Why? I'll tell you why. Because the Mishnah was written perfectly, so concise. There's so many questions, as we just displayed on the Mishnah. And since there's so many questions, these brisas are so valuable if we could compare the brisa to the